Hey guys, this is the first of the coronavirus videos. I'm trying to think of a way to do this so that we don't have to delay our work on Antony and Cleopatra. Fortunately for you, I already did videos on Othello back in 2002, so if you follow the link to my YouTube page, it will be over that way. On the sidebar, it will tell you a link to Othello and what it was I thought when I was much younger. Please try not to compare the way I look now to then. Just do me a favor and don't. That was in another country, and besides, the wench is dead. Antony and Cleopatra is much more complicated. It's really interesting. It brings together a lot of binary oppositions. It's based, of course, on a Roman version of history, and history, as you know, is always written by the winners. So there wasn't going to be any ability to read Egyptian texts, not during Shakespeare's time, until Champollion managed to decode the Rosetta Stone. And so now we know a lot more about what Cleopatra was like. Spoiler alert, she wasn't very much like Shakespeare's Cleopatra, except in one particular way. She was very charming, two ways. Very charming and scary smart. This is a woman who managed to, who knew 5 or 6 different languages, and among them was Egyptian. She was from a Greek dynasty. We will not go into that tiresome issue of skin tone and ethnicity because people go down a rabbit hole about it. She was from Africa. She was from Africa. That's where she was born. That's where she lived. That's where she was a queen. That's all we have to say. But since she came from a Hellenistic Greek dynasty, something descended from Alexander the Great and his generals, the Ptolemies didn't speak Egyptian. I mean, why? You just rule these people. You don't have to talk to them. So Cleopatra was unusual in that she went ahead and she learned Egyptian. And there's an important bit in the first scene where Antony says, well, let's do something fun. And he mentions that one of her things that she wanted to do was to go about and observe the qualities of people. Last night you did desire it. This seems to have been a thing she did. I mean, she went around, disguised herself as an ordinary person, and listened to see what the people were actually interested in, what were their concerns. That's the kind of thing you'd expect a good monarch to do, and it's something that Henry V does in his own eponymous play. So the vision of Cleopatra that we have via actresses such as Theda Bara and Elizabeth Taylor with the amazing eye makeup really isn't much like the historical Cleopatra. But to a certain extent, all of those more modern Cleopatras have been mediated through Shakespeare's Cleopatra. And something important to consider, too, about that is that Cleopatra was not being played by a 37-year-old woman, as she was historically, but by a 14 or 15-year-old boy. And some of the ways in which she presents her gender is something that's written into the text to make it very clear that this is a woman. There's always this sort of double construction, and if you read Stephen Orgel, you can see how this works, of the knowledge that this is a boy, and also the knowledge that this is a boy playing a woman. And we don't really know how much the suspension of disbelief played into that. It was a much older convention to look at that and say, oh, they just accepted them as women. They never thought about the fact that they were boys ever. And Stephen Orgel, who did some early queer studies said that's ridiculous, that the boys were never an object of desire. Of course they were. So the extent to which she's very heavily gendered female, the extent to which she is the boy actor playing her, there's even a reference at the end of the play to this. There's some fascinating things. I mentioned binary oppositions. There's the opposition of Rome and Egypt, most obviously. And Egypt is coded as dark and feminine and fertile and chthonic and mysterious. It's Edward Said's Orientalism in operation. And Rome is very masculine, it's very sterile, it's very dry and hard and logical and not emotional. And so in a way you can almost see this play as pivoting between Octavius, who is the far end of Roman, and Cleopatra, who is the far end of Egyptian. Finally, something to bear in mind is that when this play was written and produced, the country had recently had a female monarch. Queen Elizabeth had been queen for all of Shakespeare's life, really, up until 1603, and he was in his 40s. It must have been an extraordinary transition. Is it even possible for her to die? What happens after she's gone? And she'd been replaced by her cousin or nephew or whatever, James I, James VI of Scotland. And he was very different and had a very patriarchal view of things. So you can see this play in some ways as occupying a space between Elizabeth and James as well. Anyway, there's many things to discuss, and I look forward to discussing them with you. We'll be using Zoom. I've never used it before, but it'll be an adventure. And of course, I almost said death is the last great adventure. That's really bad. Not death. Not death is the next great adventure. So I'll be seeing more of you soon. Bye-bye.